Donald Trump's honeymoon with Russia is over. This week, Trump issued a new ultimatum to Putin and got into a war of words with the former president of Russia. Could this be the start of a serious escalation of geopolitical risk? What should you be doing with your money right now? Donald Trump loves deadlines. He has a long history of using them as a strategic tool in negotiation. Trump uses deadlines to control the narrative, shape public perception, and force action. On July 14th, Trump issued a 50-day ultimatum to Putin, demanding that Russia agree to a peace deal with Ukraine or face new punishing sanctions. 2 weeks later, on July 28th, Trump said that he's shortening that deadline to just 10 to 12 days. Trump is known to extend his deadlines and not to shorten them. What prompted him to change his mind about the Russia-Ukraine war now? What does the new urgency signify? Trump's original deadline for Putin was issued on the day he met with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte to discuss selling weapons to Ukraine through Europe. His decision to shorten the deadline came a day after he met with the European Commission's President Ursula von der Leyen to finalize a one-sided trade deal in favor of the US. Trump's professed growing frustration with Putin has brought his position closer to Europe's stance on the Ukraine war. Is it possible that Trump's new hardline on Russia is a quid pro quo in the current transatlantic reconciliation? More specifically, is Trump's shortened deadline for Putin in exchange for Europe's tacit acquiescence to his 15% tariff? I don't know, but I think it's a reasonable assumption to make. And if I'm right, this is bearish for the euro and European markets. There's a growing sense of urgency in Europe about how the Ukraine war is going. Russia's summer offensive is gaining momentum. Over the past 3 months, Russian troops gained more than 1,500 square kilometers in territories, compared to just 600 square kilometers gained during the same period in 2024. The last time the Russian side had this much momentum in the battlefield was in November 2024. But heavy casualties prevented Russian forces from sustaining the momentum back then. And the arrival of winter soon after gave time to the Ukrainian side to regroup. This time things are quite different. We're still in the middle of summer, and winter is still 4 months away. Marco Rubio claimed last month that 100,000 Russian soldiers have been killed in Ukraine in 2025 so far. However, numbers compiled from verified publicly available sources suggest otherwise. The disparity in bodies exchanged between the two sides in June also tells a very different story. On July 17th, Russia returned the bodies of 1,000 Ukrainian soldiers killed in combat in exchange for the remains of just 19 Russian soldiers. That's a ratio of 50 to 1. If there's any shortage of manpower, it is in Ukraine. Zelensky signed a bill this week to allow Ukrainians over the age of 60 to volunteer to enlist in the military. The situation in Ukraine looks pretty dire, if you ask me. Russian troops have entered Seversk, surrounded Pokrovsk and Kupiansk, and now closing in on Liman and Kostyantynivka. Russia has also committed 50,000 soldiers in a new push in the Sumy region. Concerns are now rising that a quick and deep Russian breakthrough will collapse the Ukrainian defenses in the east, cut off retreating Ukrainian forces, and enable further Russian advance towards central Ukraine. Ukraine is now in a mad dash to build a new line of defense with triple rows of fortifications all the way from the Kharkiv region in the north to Zaporozhye in the south. But it is a massive undertaking that will take time to complete. My hunch is that Europe decided to buy Ukraine some time by enlisting the help of the US. My gut says that Europe agreed to Trump's tariff blackmail only because it was the only way they might be able to stop Putin before it is too late for Ukraine. If I'm right, the question is whether Trump agreed to this bargain in good faith. The question is what Trump will do if his ultimatum fails to slow the Russian advance. Would he chicken out? Or would he risk a serious escalation with Russia? But either way, it is negative for Europe and for European markets, in my view. The only official response from Russia to Trump's new shortened deadline is a tweet from Dmitry Medvedev, former Russian president and prime minister and currently the deputy chairman of the National Security Council. This is what Medvedev wrote about Trump's ultimatum. Russia isn't Israel or even Iran. Each new ultimatum is a threat and a step towards war. Are these empty words? Russia hawks in the US and in Europe believe that the Ukraine war, now in its fourth year, has weakened Russia. The war has resulted in hundreds of thousands of casualties and is taking a toll on the Russian economy, finally. The IMF this week downgraded its forecast of Russian GDP growth for 2025 to just 0.9%, a steep drop from the 4.1% growth in 2024. Meanwhile, oil price, an important economic lifeline for Russia, is near a 5-year low. But it is a mistake to think that Putin would agree to stop the war before his goals have been met, in my view. Rightly or wrongly, Putin believes Russia is fighting a defensive war. For Putin, the war's purpose is to stop Ukraine's NATO membership and the deployment of NATO missile launchers on Russia's border. I don't doubt that the recent talk of deployment of British and French troops to Ukraine has only added to Putin's resolve. I don't doubt that from Putin's point of view, the Ukraine war is an existential war. He cannot afford to place his trust in Trump. Indeed, the Unbound Cold War II survey shows that the brief surge of goodwill in Russia towards the US at the start of the new Trump presidency is fading rapidly. Meanwhile, the share of our Russian respondents who said that Russia has the upper hand in the global power struggle remains near a 3-year high. Is there any chance that Putin would agree to a ceasefire before Trump's 10-day deadline expires? I think not. At least on the battlefield, Russia is in the strongest position it's been since the start of the war. Putin has no incentive to give up the strong momentum behind the Russian offensive by agreeing to a ceasefire right now. A ceasefire would allow Ukrainian forces to regroup, allow Ukrainians to replenish their ammunition, and allow Ukrainians to complete a new defense line. This is the best chance Putin has had in 3 years to end the war on his terms. But to do that, he needs to finish what he started. And stopping the war right now is not an option. The only question is whether Trump understands that or not. Trump says that he will hit Russia with sanctions if Putin does not stop the war. It is not clear what sanctions he has in mind, but the US Senate has a bill ready to go that will place a 100% tariff on China and India for importing Russian energy. Trump's decision to hit India with a 25% tariff this week, supposedly because of New Delhi's unwillingness to cut off ties with Russia, is likely meant as a warning shot. But I don't believe Trump has the stomach to go down this path. Not because I don't think he has the appetite to pick a fight with China and India, but because the price of the sanctions would be much higher oil price. Russia exports nearly 3 million barrels of oil to Asia a day. Any disruption will send oil prices sharply higher. Trump could try to tighten existing sanctions against the Russian economy. But the Biden administration implemented so many sanctions against Russia that it's hard to see what else is left on the table. It will be difficult for Trump to hurt Russia without the cooperation of China, India, and Brazil. The Chinese foreign minister told the European Union last month that it would not accept Russia losing the war against Ukraine. Trump's 25% tariff on India is a clear indication where Modi stands on India's long-standing alliance with Russia and how the short war between India and Pakistan in May has sold India's distrust of Trump. Brazil relies heavily on Russian fertilizer, and a new poll this week shows Lula's approval rating benefiting from his growing spat with Trump. Plus ça change. Plus c'est la même chose, as the French say. Trump's foreign policy is starting to look a lot like Biden's foreign policy, at least regarding the power struggle between the unipolar world order and the multipolar one. Under Biden, the big losers were US allies like Europe and Japan. Under Trump, they might do even worse, as Trump is demanding that they help pay for holding back the multipolar world. European leaders have talked themselves into believing that once Russia is done with Ukraine, Europe will be next. Last Sunday, they showed that they're willing to pawn the economic future of Europe to deter the perceived Russian threat. The sell-off of the euro since then shows that at least the financial market is not so blind. Thank you for listening.